Oh, perfect. Right on time. Um, a visual look as I'm explaining it of the itinerary of the trip and what you can expect during your trip. So you're gonna begin. You guys are gonna take a bus from Los Angeles, and I want you to impress upon like the massive shift that you're gonna take in terms of development and the weather. Thankfully, during that time of the year, the weather will be quite pleasant. A marked difference from it, the usual 110, 100 teens weather you can find during the summer. But here's like the geography, approximately 3 to 4 hours away from Los Angeles, 2 hours away from San Diego. And you'll be staying on the first night. There'll be a dinner reception at the hotel that you're staying at in El Centro, which is in central Imperial County, perhaps one of the more developed ones. So you'll be able to see how development varies across Imperial County, even within the county's borders. So yeah, you'll be right off the Interstate 8 right there. And as you're driving to Imperial County, and certainly throughout the trip, probably this will be one of your most familiar sights, all the agricultural fields. So if you're from the country, you'll probably feel a little at home. And so the first day will be very light because you'll have traveled most of the time. So day two is really where the meat of the programming will happen. And before we get to that, I just want to show you like the vastness that I think Theo was alluding to, and like the harsh lines, like the juxtaposition between the desert and like the oasis of the agriculture and the civilization. I think you'll find interesting if you haven't ever been to this region. And on the morning of the day two, after you guys have had breakfast, we'll head on a bus to a place that holds a very prominent place in my story and in my career, actually. Is the Imperial Valley Desert Museum at the gateway of Imperial County in the city of Ocotillo on our western gateway, along the Interstate 8, where a large majority of our traffic comes in from San Diego. You'll find this museum sitting out there in one of the smaller unincorporated towns. But it is significant because it's the only federally recognized depository. So this is quite literally the repository of Imperial County's history in this building. And it focuses on indigenous history, as might tell from the front, and also the natural history, which is where you get the desert from all the creatures, the plants, and the inhabitants who have called it home over generations. And the city's named Ocotillo for this plant that you'll see everywhere, and thankfully these are views from the museum's like exterior, so you'll be able to see the vastness of right across the street. You have the Coyote Mountains, um, and most importantly, you'll start seeing all the renewables of the past, the passive broken promises that quite frankly, made all those promises, left few permanent jobs, few permanent benefits, and we have to see them every day. So it's a constant reminder of what has been and what should have been more accurately. And you'll see the wind turbines across the highway right there, Highway 8. And yeah, so I used to work there as an education specialist. So yes, I performed docent functions. I also traveled across the county taking our lessons to the students. And so I anticipate we'll have a bit of an opportunity to talk. You'll hear from me and others at this in the section museum. I didn't want to spoil any more exhibits, but this is the Oya exhibit. And a lot of these photos are very like aerial or high level, so not to spoil on the ground stuff that you'll be able to see in person. But yeah, and then from there, from the museum, you can't see the solar developments, but on the way there and on the way back into town, you'll see some of them. Although this is Imperial Valley is home to one of the largest solar arrays in the world, and it's not quite visible from the highway, but it is there. I just wanted to show that for reference and scale. This is the industry we're talking about that took up agricultural lands and didn't leave much benefit behind for the working class people of Imperial County. So just for your reference. And once the next stop after the museum, so it's quite a distance. Imperial County is very geographically large, so to get from Ocotillo to Calipatria will be approximately an hour, give or take. And once we get there, we'll stop at the headquarters of Imperial Valley Equity and Justice and the Becoming Project, who are part of the Via Unido coalition and sort of serve as our frontline forward operating base in the north end of Imperial County, which is going to be most directly impacted by Lithium Valley and all these proposed developments. And there we'll have a panel discussion over lunch, um, from a local establishment, including members of our coalition and members of the community who organize alongside us. So yeah, a lot of our magic happens here. This is where we host a lot of our town halls in the North End and such, and where I work out of from day to day sometimes. From there, we'll go from one to Calipatria to um, Sonny Bono National Wildlife Refuge. Yes, that Sonny Bono, the husband of Cher, and then previously represented this region in the United States Congress, and was a huge proponent of wildlife conservation. And so there, Ambika gave a really good account of what you can expect there, and just but in the context like that industrial landscape, you'll be able to see. These are pictures that I took that you'll just see how jarring it is, how close the developments are, and in certain places completely surround you. Especially like near the indigenous cultural resources that Ambika was talking about. And yes, you'll see a lot of wildlife in that part of the area. A lot of these, it's either it's this refuge plays an important part in what's called the Pacific Flyway, which animals either use as a stop along their migration, or some of them this is their destination. Um, and yeah, and these are some of the birds you'll see. And I want to call particular attention to a bird you might see around. Um, we'll try to have binoculars so that you can perhaps see one if you're lucky. But the burrowing owl, which part of our coalition's logo, is regularly threatened by developments in the north end of Imperial Valley, and you'll find them burrowing alongside canal banks or in other areas further in. But yeah, our mascot, for lack of a better word. And then from there, we're gonna go further up around the shore of the Salton Sea and actually get closer to it, to the city of Bombay Beach. Again, an unincorporated city. And this is meant to like show you the vast disparity in development. What used to be a thriving oceanfront town, people still live there, and I want to make sure that it's not just a passing visit. There is art installations on the beach, which I'll show you right now. Um, but it is a city where people have chosen to live or have been forced to live. But a lot of people, as you'll see in the next pictures, do find it remarkably beautiful. And at one point, it was much more beautiful. See, this picture was taken in December of last year, so this trip will be in November, and I anticipate if we time it right, you'll see a similar beautiful sight. And just experiencing the vastness of the Salton Sea is pretty remarkable. And sadly, though, each year the Salton Sea recedes approximately 10 feet. So the shoreline that you see here will be different by the time you are there later this year. Um, and yeah, like Theo was saying, it was one time that every area around the Salton Sea on both sides was a resort destination. So it all makes it all the more tragic on, especially the people who were there for that, especially like during their childhood, they can recall these memories. And we hope to talk to at least one person who can give testimony to that during the trip. Afterwards, it'll be already have a long day, so we'll take a quick stop at one of the only few establishments in Bombay Beach, which will be the Ski Inn, the historic Ski Inn, um, bar slash restaurant. And then from there, we will head back into town, back to Central Imperial County for a dinner, and then the hotel at the hotel or near the hotel. And then the day three is breakfast and farewell because we know you have to get back to Los Angeles. But with that, I'm excited to see you all here. I love Imperial County. The stakes are personal to me, as you can see, and I will pass it over in my presentation, and we'll be ready to answer any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. I'll just go over like a few logistical pieces, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So again, the trip is November 11th through the 13th. The departure time is still to be determined, but it'll probably be from downtown Los Angeles. The trip is again, it's not a moneymaker at all for JMA, but we do have to cover the cost. So the trip is $1850 this year. That includes all. We also bring like other experts, includes all the meals, transportation there, your hotel. Um, it it's essentially it's like an all-inclusive trip fee and all the logistical planning. Um, I'm trying to think what else logistically, but I think those are like the three major things. The next steps for people who are interested in coming is We do ask everyone sign a trip agreement. That kind of goes over, we still follow like a COVID and safety protocol. So it kind of goes over that, especially since we typically are traveling with a large group. And it just also goes over the payment information. And then after that, we typically send out a survey to get your dietary restrictions and any other sensitive information that we might need to like help plan the trip. Um, I think that's it in terms of logistical pieces, but I can open it up for Q&A now if there's any questions. Paul, not to put you on the spot, but I don't know if you want to say anything as a past trip participant since you've been on 2 JMA trips.
Well, it'll be such an amazing experience. I've been to Birmingham twice on GMA trips. It's very hard to describe if you haven't done it yet what an impact these kind of trips have. And I just want to lay out, a lot of us are really worried about the political situation now nationally. And the work that JMA is doing is exactly the kind of organizing that has to be done, both in the short term, but particularly in the long term. It's exactly what's going to bring the kinds of changes that we need to see. And when you go on these trips, you just see this on the ground work. And particularly for me, living in Los Angeles, I'm not familiar with the history of this area at all, and that's not good. But this is really an opportunity to see things in person, really connect with the organizers, really see the work that's being done. And I guarantee you it'll be a lifelong, life impacting experience.
Thanks, Paula. I think Mira, you were first and then Ruku.
Awesome. Thank you. And thanks everyone for taking the time to present today. My name is Mira, for those of you who I may not know. I'm with a family office based in the Bay Area, and I've been getting to know Imperial Valley over the last year or so now and have had the chance to visit once, but I'm really looking forward to visiting again. One question I had, and we don't necessarily have to talk about it now, but Theo, while you were kind of giving us the history and high-level overview, one of the things I'm hoping that we can perhaps spend some time talking about, either on the trip or another conversation, is what the community's experience with the development of geothermal was, and like how some of those negative experiences and lessons learned from those negative experiences are now shaping how you're thinking about what to put in the upfront community benefits agreements to ensure that you're addressing those concerns at the outset versus seeing them crop up like 10, 15 years later. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me, for example, is like the environmental impacts that have turned into health impacts with the recession of like the Salton Sea and how that's led to the health, like the air pollutants. And maybe that's not something that you would have thought about then, right? But like we all think about it now. And so I'm curious to learn a bit more about like, what are those lessons learned? What were those negative experiences? And given that this is direct lithium extraction that we're talking about, how and that requires some amount of engagement with geothermal, like how do those two things kind of come together in this piece of work? So
Sure. Thanks for that question, Mira. So I think one thing I want to kind of like emphasize too is where like if you've been on the Alabama learning trip, it's kind of like uh you're entering into two different campaign phases where the Alabama learning trip, this is post CBA, this is post win, where a lot of the work that was done to win the CBA and what has informed it was already done and signed, while the Imperial County trip, we're in the midst of an ongoing campaign. And I think a lot of what you've said, like you might as well be a campaigner on our team because this is what our program looks like. And what we're building towards. I think the itinerary Jacob is sharing, it's one that may change depending on our planned campaign flashpoints. Just to maybe allude but not give away too much to what you're referring to with like around the geothermal industry is that we're looking at a lot of permitting for geothermal, and the particular permitting for geothermal power plants for anything 50 megawatts and higher require a more robust analysis that actually looks at or the scope isn't wide, but starts looking at working conditions of people who are in these facilities. And it's no surprise that, of course, in the permitting paperwork, it says everything is safe, everything is great. And there are a lot of learning lessons from other extractive industries like oil and gas. And a lot of the environmental impacts were unknown at the time and were only known after it was studied 10 years later. So the reason why I say this is because there's precedent now of how we're approaching these big industrial rezones. And there's not only precedent in policy, but there's also precedent in community benefit agreement language. Much of what we're pursuing is it might be robust and it might be a combination of a lot of things in the CBA, but it's things that have been done before, some things that either JMA has done before or campaigners with JMA have done with other organizations. So there is a pathway forward, and we want to be able to showcase that to folks on this trip. So yeah, without giving too much strategy, it is things that we are thinking about on the ground. And I'm also I know this is for the Imperial County learning trip, but I always like to pitch like the Alabama learning trip too, because you're entering at different campaign stages. And the more you learn about the New Flyer CBA and then the Imperial County CBA, you'll see that there is this shared history of struggle, and these movements have a lot more in common despite the geographic range.
Thanks, Theo. Roku?
Hi there, Ruku Singla from Equal Rights Advocates, and thank you all for coordinating. I know a number of folks who went on some of the previous Birmingham trips who really found it incredibly valuable. So my question was if you could say a little more to the extent that you know, like what your sense of the sort of jobs component will be in terms of what types of sectors you're hoping the CBA to cover. And also, is there, and I apologize if you already went over this, but is there a specific developer who's sort of point in all this, or is that still playing out in terms of who the targets for engagement are?
I can take this on because I feel like there's a simple way to answer it, but there's also a more complex way to answer it. And there's three developers pioneering direct lithium extraction. It's Berkshire Hathaway Renewables, and their joint venture called Terra Lithium. They're in a demo stage, and then there's Controlled Thermal Resources with their project called Hell's Kitchen. Um, an appropriate name, I guess. I don't know. Called appropriate, but then there's Energy Source Minerals, and their project is called Project Atlas. These are three very different campaigns at different stages of, I would say, like corporate maturation. You can almost describe Energy Source Minerals, despite being a geothermal power plant, and this developer as kind of like a mom and pop corporation. While Controlled Thermal Resources is more of a foreign newcomer, they have a lot of backing from Australia. And then you have the most mature corporation of them all. It's Berkshire Hathaway that has about 10 power plants in the region, piloting 3 more, and they are a global operation with a vast renewable energy portfolio. So in these past 2 years, depending on when you would ask, like which month you would ask, there was one that was point. And I would say it changes day by day because of the complexities, not only with this administration, but the complexities with the technology, a lot of the industry hype around direct lithium extraction. But the goal is to win. In our analysis, I think there's one that that we think is actually the one that could be most successful, and that's probably the one we're targeting. But there's also a slew of industries being introduced with the Lithium Valley specific plan, and what we're I think Ambika spoke about this a lot, that there was a promise of lithium jobs in manufacturing, yet this Lithium Valley specific plan is now talking about data centers. They're talking about green hydrogen. They're talking about all of these things that wouldn't build out a supply chain in the region. So I would say the community is a very much, and our coalition is very much sharpening its vision of what it could be. And it's not just good for community. It actually, the vision that we're putting forward would actually be good for developers, like a way to do this responsibly, and a way to do this where it would like reap the financial gain that these corporations are looking for. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, or if I tend to answer with long-winded questions, but I think every question here for something of this magnitude requires a bit more explanation.
Thanks, Theo. Just checking to see if there's like any other questions about the trip, next steps, logistics, the work in Imperial. Okay, I think we're good. If anyone needs the
Sorry.
trip agreement, oh, sorry, I can't see everyone.
Hi, this is Juliet. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation. I am curious, is there a capacity of how many folks will be in attendance? And can people opt to provide their own transportation? We have other grantee partners in the region, and when we're there, we typically like to visit other partners, and so it would be helpful to have our own transportation and kind of maximize our time there.
Yeah, there isn't capacity because we were far enough out in advance that we typically we just reserve like a large room block, and then we can kind of reduce from there. So we can always, if you're interested in the trip but you also need your own transportation, we can always like accommodate in terms of like the trip fee, things like that. But to answer your question, there is no like capacity limit per se, because we always just can accommodate based on like the amount, the bus that we need to get and the rooms that we need to block off. The room part is the hardest because there is gosh, and Theo, you could correct me. There's something actually happening in November, so that's like the room issue right now, and I can't remember like what we're competing against. But there's always like a workaround, but there is none.
Thank you so much. And I think there's a question in the chat that I was also wondering about, which is when the deadline would be to finally decide when to join or not.
The hard deadline is would be like the first week of August, because we have to just prepay for everything. But we would ideally like to know by June. Any other questions? I want to make sure I can answer for everyone. If not, if anyone, the next step would be signing the trip agreement. And like I said, that kind of goes over our COVID and safety policies. And then we start working with you on a survey to kind of gather like any needs you have. I think everyone on the call has my email, or there's the development@JMA email address. So if you email either of those, I can get the trip agreement to you and start working on next steps. Thanks again for everyone who came.
So Chris, that was my question. Are you sending out a general email to sign up for the trip soon?
I won't send a general. If people are interested, then I'll ask. Then I can request their signature. We'll send the agreement via Adobe.
But you're not I mean, there are many people I want to tell about this and invite them. Will there be a invitation to go on the trip that's coming up?
I mean, I think that's what the emails, but I don't think there's like another formal one, if that's what you mean. I mean, we can always send you like some emails to use, but this was, I think, I want to say we've done a lot of different emails, so I don't want to bombard people with them.
Yeah, I would just love, and maybe other people too, just a email that I can send to people saying this is just a rough itinerary of what we're doing, the dates, and a way for them to let you know they want to go.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely work on that.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Thanks a lot, everyone.